Good day, class. I'm Jane Marian Manasagaran, your pre-service teacher for today. And as you all know, we are having a teaching demonstration. So I hope that all of you will participate and listen. And just a reminder before we start our lessons, I hope that you have your own notebooks or papers and pen so that you can take down notes, important informations in this discussion. So um, before we start the lesson proper, I'll give you a minute for your own prayers. So let's start. So now let's begin. Before we go to our discussion, which are the RRM policy and the RRM agencies, we'll talk about the previous lesson, which is the concepts and principles in DRRM and DRRM cycles. So in your previous lessons, you tackle about the warning systems, response mechanisms, education and training, rehearsals and drills, and lastly, what is disaster risk management? So just a little bit of review before we start. Warning systems are regarded as tools that are inevitable to all disaster preparedness effort. It is also a relevant system of communications that you have to establish. Um, in a successful warning system, must include accurately prediction of the location, time, and severity of the hazard. We also have well communicated to decision making and um, makers and communities, and be appropriately relayed to target audience based on details, understanding, and of the conditions of the needs. So we also have the response mechanism, which is relevant in the whole disaster preparedness plan, as it set out the action, procedures, and management arrangement once the community requires them before, during, and after the threat. So we also have the education training. In education and training takes several forms, namely public education in schools, special training courses, extension programs, which also be included in community of village-based outreach workers. We also have public information in the in rehearsal and drills. Rehearsal and drills are simply the act of putting your evacuation and response procedure into practice. In this, it is really important to practice how you manage the um, uh, haz- hazardous threat, because in this we can practice what to do and what you should do. Um, in the last one, which is the what is the disaster risk management? Disaster risk management refers to a systemic approach that provides strategies, policies, and mechanisms to minimize the impact of hazards and possibility of disaster. So that ends our review for your last lesson. So we're gonna dig into the lessons for today, which are the RRM policy and the RRM agencies. The table of contents is the first one, Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, and agencies involved in disaster risk reduction and management. Our learning objective for today is about the first is learn about PDRRM Act of 2010. Second, determine the agencies involved in DRRR. And lastly, determine the other members of the NDRRMC. So, disaster risk, eh, excuse me, uh, Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010. In January 2005, the Philippines concurred the adaptation of the Yogo Framework for Actions 2005 to 2015, building the resilience of nations and communities to disasters. In May 2010, the Philippine government enacted the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, or RA number 10121 in 2010, which repealed the PD number 1566 in 1978. This act, which is consideration of Senate Bill number 3086 and House Bill number 6985, provides for the development of policies and plans and implementation of actions and measures which pertains to all aspects of disaster risk reduction and management. In RA number 10121 or RA number 10121 also focuses on good governance, risk assessment, and early warning, knowledge and building and awareness raising, reduction of underlying factors, and preparedness for effective response and early recovery. So in this act, it's mainly how the government can reduce or how to manage whenever there are disasters in our country. So, Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act. It is also part of the Act of 2010. First is the DRRM Act 6 to adopt a disaster risk reduction management approach that is holistic, comprehensive, integrated, and proactive in lessening the social, economic, and environmental impacts of disaster. As what I have said, it is the DRRM Act of 2010 is to seek or adapt how the social, how to lessen or how to reduce the socioeconomic and environmental impacts of a disaster. It also provides, promotes, and support dialogue, exchange of information, and coordination among all the government agencies, development of policies and plans, and the implementation of actions and measures pertaining to all aspects of the RRM. In here, in the second one, it promotes a, as we can say, communication to all the government agencies that are established to help and reduce any hazardous threat in our country or community. In DRRM Act, in number 3, DRRM Act features the need for making fundamental and strong foundation of DRRM policies, structures, coordination, mechanisms, and programs with continuing budget appropriation on DRR from national to local levels. So it's not only in the national level, but also to those local levels in our country. And number 4, NDRRMC's underlying task as the backbone of disaster management is to develop a comprehensive NDRRM plan and framework. So, as part of the DRRM Act of 2010, the DRRM Act revised national DRRM funds, which shall be used for disaster risk reduction or mitigation, prevention, and preparedness activities with 30% to be allocated as quick response standby fund for relief and recovery programs. In this one, as you all know, whenever we have a typhoon or any natural calamities in our country, our government have its own allocated funds to help those victims of the flood, of the typhoon, of a landslide. We always have every level of our country, national or local level in our community, all have a allocated funds to be used whenever there's a hazardous threat in our community. Number two, further, not less than 5% of the estimated revenue from regular sources shall be allocated to the local DRRM funds to support disaster risk management activities, including the payment for premium calamity insurance. So as you see, it's not only 30%, but meron pa tayong less than 5% of the estimated revenue. It is also included to as a payment for those calamity insurances. In the number three, the last one, I guess, the NDRRM framework was adopted on June 16, 2011, and the NDRRM Plan 2011 to 2018 has been released. These documents serve as the primary guide for country on disaster preparedness. So it is adopted during June 16, 2011. So hazard specific early warning regulations. So in this one, we have the integrated early warning systems. Pag ito na yun, multiple hazards, multiple users. So here, that is disaster risk knowledge, detection of monitoring and forecasting, dissemination and communication, and preparedness and of all levels. Yan. So in this one, hazard-specific early warning regulation, the desk survey did not find any independent laws or provision that specifically deals with early warnings and reduction of underlying risk factor through regulation and early warnings and reduction of underlying risk factor through regulation and relation to following hazards. So these are the following hazards: cyclones, tornadoes or storms, earthquakes and tsunami, heat and cold waves, insect and infestations, landslide and avalanche, volcanoes, drought and related famine. It is except for the establishment of PBOX and PAGASA. Again, it is the following hazards which is do not have any independent laws or provision: cyclones, tornadoes and storms, earthquakes and tsunami, heat and cold waves, insect infestation, landslide and avalanches, volcanoes, drought and related famine. FIVOX. We will talk about FIVOX. FIVOX is a national institute dedicated to provide information on activities of volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and the other related geotectonic phenomena. In the FIVOX, they are the one who provides information whenever there's an active volcanoes for about to erupt, earthquake magnitude or intensity, impending tsunamis, and other related geotectonic phenomena. It is also created guidelines and information materials on disaster response and preparedness, and conducted simulation tests or relevant drills intended for the protection of the life and property and in support of the economic productivity and sustainable development. In FIVOX also, They created out guidelines or information materials for us to um, to use as a guide whenever we have a um, earthquake or volcanic eruption. They're the one who provides those guidelines. They also conducted simulation tests to find out what they should do whenever we have a um, any hazard hazard threat in the country. Pag-asa. We talk about Pag-asa naman. Pag-asa is a national government agency mandated to provide flood and typhoon warnings, public weather forecasts, and advisories, and meteorological, astronomical, climatological, and other specialized information and services affecting national safety, welfare, and economy. Sa pag-asa naman, they're the one who give us warnings if we have impending low pressure area. Most notably, they're the one who is uh, the one who gives weather forecast in we have a weather report every news channel. They give us information in how big or how long will the typhoon will be in our country or in a specific city. With regards to meteorological and data gathering and analysis, the Philippine Fisheries Code of 1998 also requires all vessels and craft passing navigational lanes or engage in fisheries to contribute data from its voyage to Pag-asa and Philox. So, hazard-specific early warnings regulation. The revised Fire Code of the Philippines 2008 deals predominantly with building and structural fire risk, but without any comprehensive forest fire management laws or policies on it. So here we have also the Water Code 1976 contains limited provisions on flood management and controls and does not include measures for drought preparedness or risk reduction, which is deemed important in disaster and risk management. Here in Republic Act number 6716, an act providing for the construction of water wells, rainwater collector, development of spring rehabilitation of existing water wells in all barangays in the Philippines is primarily governed by the DPWH. Ito naman, laws created to counter loopholes water crisis. National Water Crisis Act of 1995, Administrative Order Number 94, providing measures for the optimum utilization of water resources in Metro Manila. Here is specifically in Metro Manila. So the second one is the Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization Act of 1997 and the Philippines Fisheries Code of 1998. We'll tackle about the regulation of the built environment. Okay. The National Building Code of the Philippines in 1977, as adopted by Presidential Decree number 1096 from Revised Republic Act of 6541, enumerates the framework of minimum standards and requirements to regulate sites, location control, design material design, material quality, and maintenance of all the buildings and structures consisted with the principles of sound environmental management. In this code, Philippine code, um, they're the one who regulated the buildings constructions. They check the location area if there's no natural um, natural sources there that can be cut or something in the location control, the designs, and specifically the material quality um, and the maintenance of the building. It is also authorized officials to issue building permits for construction, repair, and demolition, or even entering the building premises for inspection. So they're also the one who gives building permits if you want to build a business company or building, hospitals. All those buildings requires a construction permits or so that they can build or they can construct what building they want to build. So the law covers private to public buildings. Class, let's highlight this one. This law covers private to building public buildings. So hindi na siya private but also public with exception to indigenous family dwelling. So however, the National Building Code does not provide for inspection of buildings that was built before the decree or predating the approval of National Building Code. So there's an exception to every rule. So the exception for this one is those old buildings that was built before the code was decreed. So for example, if the decree is um, 1997, here in 1997, you cannot put a building permits to those buildings who are built in 1975 or 1976. So in terms of urban and land development and the land use, there are three government agencies that enforce the law regarding the aforementioned aforementioned. Okay. Again, these are the three government agencies. Housing, the first one is Housing and Land Use Regulatory Board or HLURB. Second, Housing and Urban Developing Coordinating Council or HUDCC. And the last one is the National Housing Authority or NHA. So, the regulation of building environment. So, kasali pa po ito. LGUs are able to assume the powers of the HLURB to approve subdivision plans of cities and municipalities. Again, what is HLURB? HLURB is a Housing and Land Use Regulatory Board. The following laws, we are also still in the regulation of the built environment. The following laws are beneficial to LGUs and executing the proper standard on houses in urban areas, especially in the development of the high-risk site. Okay, PD number 957 of 1976 of the Law Field Project, the Condominium Act of 1966, and its revised implementing rules and regulation IRR of 2009 govern housing development in open markets. Second, Batasang Pambansa 220 in 1982, and its revised IRR in 2008 govern economic and socialized housing development. Third is the Republic Act number 7279 or Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992, which seeks to implement a housing program for the underprivileged and homeless citizens in urban areas and improve the nature security. However, these laws do not assure and provide for public open space for evacuation and emergency shelters. Again, The following laws are the PD number 957 of 1976, Batasang Pambansa 220 in 1982, and Republic Act number 7279 or Urban Developmental and Housing Act of 1992. The revised IRR for Presidential Decree 957 in 2009 and revised IRR for Batasang Pambansa 20 in 2008 provide the regulation of the road construction. However, they do not specifically provide for emergency, as we all said there in the last slide. To answer these problems, the National Land Use Committee, or NLUC, created in 2008 to oversee matters concerning land use and physical planning, from formulating a national physical framework plan to inclusion of disaster risk management into national socio-economic plans and programs. Again, since we don't have, this law doesn't provide the emergency service access, the government answers the problems by using the National Land Use Committee to oversee matters about this one. Here in the rural land development is under the jurisdiction of Department of Agriculture. Again, the rural land development is in the jurisdiction of the Department of Agriculture. The Government Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP, aims to provide a more systematic land settlements programs and public lands distribution to farmers. Again, the CARP aims to provide a more systemic land settlement programs and public land distribution to farmers. The Local Government Code of 1991 empowers LGUs and local landless farmers to reclassify agricultural land to non-agricultural uses and formulating their comprehensive land use plans. Here in the Executive Order number 406 of 1990 mandates the government agencies to integrate their programs and projects with the CARP for dual advantage of the government and farmers. Again, what is CARP? CARP is the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, which aims to provide a more systemic land settlements, programs, and public land distribution to farmers. Also under in the Rural Land Development, the Department of Justice, or DOJ, regulates the land title registration where real estate ownership may be legally confirmed and recorded in the archives of the government as supervised by the Land Registration Authority, or LRA. The land survey records here sa baba niya, records are responsibility of the Land Management Bureau, or LMB, within the Department of Environment and National Resources. So the land survey records are responsibilities of Land Management Bureau, while the Land Management Bureau are within the Department of Environment and National Resources. We'll talk about again the Republic Act number 83171. Again, Republic Act number 8371, or the Indigenous People Rights Act of 1997, gives indigenous rural communities and indigenous people the rights of ownership over ancestral lands and domains. In this Republic Act, indigenous people are have the rights to own their, di ba meron silang mga ancestral lands where their ancestors lies, or where they build their communities in the indigenous places. So in this Republic Act, they gain the right of ownership to their ancestral lands. Here naman in the Civil Code of the Philippines of 1949, it recognizes several anti-oppressive policies to the people as the government does not allow squatting in slum areas and squatters face eviction and demolition of their settlements. So in the news, diba, we also encountered those in the that always an issue for the demolition of the squatters area. They um, nagkakaroon ng demolition because they are evicting those people who have their houses or build their settlement areas in those land that the government does not allow people to use as their houses. So it lies here in the Civil Code of the Philippines of 1949. So here in the regulation of the national and rural environment, the DENR, along with 6 line bureaus, is the primary agency that implements the country's laws by the government and natural resources. Here are the 6 line agencies of DENR. Environment Management Bureau, EMB, Mines and Geosciences Bureau, or MGB, Forest Management Bureau, or FMB, Ecosystem Research Development Bureau, or ERDB, Biodiversity Management Bureau, or BMB, and the last one is the Land Management Bureau. As stated in the Philippine Environment Policy in 1979, it seeks to create, develop, maintain, and improve conditions under which man and nature can thrive in productive and enjoyable harmony with each other to fulfill the social, economic, and other requirements of the present and future generation of the Filipinos, and ensure the attainment of an individual quality that is conducive to a life of dignity and well-being. So, in the regulation of the national and rural environment, we have the Presidential Decree number 1152, or also known as Philippine Environment Code of 1977, that gives the general rules on environment management and the laws and policies governing on it. The DENR also established an impact assessment system which requires every private and public establishment to submit the Environmental Impact System, or EIS, an Environmental Compliance Certificate, or ECC, for the quality of projected projects that significantly affects the environment. In terms of local participation of LGUs in civil and local governance, the local government code provides a good system of decentralization and development of national powers. Also under in the regulation of the national and rural environment, the DRRM Act stresses the importance of community education, community education and participation in DRR to develop and strengthen the capacities for vulnerable and marginalized groups to mitigate response, to prepare for and to recover from the effects of the disaster. The local DRRM offices are required, okay, here, required to organize and conduct training, orientation, and knowledge management activities on DRRM at the local level. So we have a earthquake drill, fire drill in our schools. So the one who is conducting the training, or the one who sent people to orientate or to give knowledge or to share the knowledge regarding to those drill are the local DRRM offices. So again, they must disseminate information and raise public awareness about hazards, vulnerabilities, and risks, their nature, effects, early warning signs, and countermeasures. So whenever we have for example, fire drill, they explain to us the hazards of the fire drills, the vulnerabilities, and the risk of the fires. They also explain to us the nature of the fires, the effects of it physically, and in the buildings also, effects of the fire in the buildings, the effects of the fire in a human. They also give us early warning signs and countermeasures. In early warning signs, we encounter these ones when we have typhoon or low pressure area. So they give us early warnings. Diba? Every time there's a typhoon nearby or in our country, we all have or we all got a text messages that a specific place is the specific place is the center of the typhoon, or whenever we have a earthquake in some places, we receive those texts as well, explaining to us or informing us the magnitude and intensity of those earthquakes and the countermeasures within. So especially in the schools, di ba, pag nag-ulan, we have a alert level 1, alert level 2. Di ba, pag alert level 1, preschool students will have no class. Alert level 2, elementary students will have no class, and so on. So it's still in the local DRM offices. In student body, DRRM requires secondary and tertiary schools to integrate the policies of DRRM and administrative subjects like NSTP, including public and private and formal and informal EP, etc. So here in the schools, DRRM requires a secondary and tertiary schools to conduct or integrate those policies of DRRM. So, like the subject of NSTP, they also tackle this subject. So, like in this subject, di ba? Disaster risk and DRRR. So, it's also part of this one. DRRM requires secondary and tertiary to conduct those subjects to be taught. In K-12 curriculum, climate change is integrated in primary and secondary education curriculum, while the environment education is integrated in school curricula at all levels. So we all experience having these lessons about the climate changes, environmental education. That will be the end of the discussion for today. And I hope that you have a good time. So regarding to your activities and assignment, it will be posted in your Schoology class in the DRRR, and other information or other reminders will be given by Ma'am Nunyesa as well. So I hope that you have a good time. So that will be the end. So thank you for participating and listening to the discussion. So I hope that uh, you all learn and that you gain a knowledge for this one. So thank you. Once again, thank you.